Excuse me, do you have a minute to answer some questions?
Oh, sure, okay.
Why is it that every time you learn a new skill, a language, an instrument, your brain is rewiring itself and constantly changing? It's like working out. That's crazy. I don't get it.
Oh my gosh, you must be talking about neuroplasticity. So basically, that's a process that shows our brains are constantly adapting, constantly changing, and that they're alive. Let me give you a quick lesson. So, neuroplasticity is a process that involves adaptive, structural, and functional changes to the brain. It's defined as the ability of the nervous system to change its activity in response to stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, or connections after injury.
Scientists once thought that once we reached adulthood, the brain stopped changing. Now we know that it never really stops.
Neuroplasticity is an ongoing process throughout life, not just after an injury, although it becomes significantly active during injury recovery. It is the brain's continuous ability to change and adapt in response to experiences, learning, and memory formation, as well as due to damage.
While it can be harnessed to recover function after brain injury by creating new neural pathways, the brain is also constantly rewiring itself through everyday activities like learning new skills.
So neuroplasticity is essentially the brain's ability to reorganize and learn by forming new connections between neurons. It's how we learn languages, remember faces, and even heal after trauma.
Every time you repeat something, practicing a song, solving math problems, or forming a new habit, you strengthen specific neural pathways all across different parts of the brain, each for different purposes. Wow, that is so interesting and crazy. But what happens when someone gets a brain injury or a spinal cord injury and they lose part of their brain function or forget things? What happens then?
Okay, so yeah, neuroplasticity is still being studied. It's very complicated, but let's see how we can apply this to a brain injury case. So neuroplasticity is commonly thought to occur in 3 phases. So the first stage is the first 48 hours after an injury, and depending on the source and severity of the injury, such as a stroke or a TBI, there is initial damage that culminates in cell death with the loss of certain cortical pathways associated with the lost neurons. The brain will attempt to use secondary neuronal networks to maintain function. Rods and cones in the retina are examples of secondary receptors. While sensory neurons are an example of a part of the secondary neuronal network, the next stage is the weeks following an injury. Recruitment of support cells occurs in this period as the cortical pathways shift from inhibitory to excitatory. Synaptic plasticity and new connections are made during this period. And the last stage in this regeneration is considered to be the weeks to months afterward, depending on severity. The brain continues to remodel itself via axonal sprouting and further reorganization around the damage.
So, how does this all work on a chemical level? How does the brain actually go about doing this? Because we can understand conceptually, but what about physically in the real world?
So, the regeneration of neurons goes through something called synaptic plasticity, which is the ability of the brain to make experience-dependent, long-lasting changes that leads to physical change in the neurons. Things that have been associated with the decrease of neuromodulators include aging and neurodegenerative diseases, which may contribute to a reduction in synaptic plasticity. Other types of plasticity include metaplasticity, which broadens the concept to include networks and involves the activity-dependent changes in synapses and how they respond, as well as homeostatic plasticity, mechanisms that maintain homeostasis of the synaptic network over time.
Well, we're psychology students and we can test this. How do you think we should do that?
Alright, so let's ask the question, can a period of training in a particular activity lead to an increased brain growth or neuroplasticity in a specific region of the brain pertaining to that activity? Let's test this out.
For our experiment, we asked the question, can a period of training in a particular activity lead to an increased brain growth or neuroplasticity in a specific region pertaining to that activity? Hypothesis. If someone learns to play an instrument over a long period of time, then they will show an increase in neuroplasticity either through increased brain growth or increased activity in a particular region.
So this is an experimental study. Understanding neuroplasticity is important because we can learn how our brain changes and adapts to new situations and environments, and this question specifically helps us understand how humans learn new skills and how those changes are maintained over time. This research can be helpful in understanding how neural pathways can be restored after traumatic injury, and they can be helpful in developing educational plans.
In our experiment, an inexperienced musician will learn to play guitar over the course of several months for 3 hours every week, and the brain growth / neuroplasticity will be measured using fMRI and MRI.
There are many things you can do at home to foster your neural pathways and to increase brain growth or the strength of your brain. Think of it as like working out. So you could brush your teeth or comb your hair with your non-dominant hand. You could try writing or drawing with your non-dominant hand. You could also attempt to text with your non-dominant hand.
Shrika, thank you so much for teaching me all of this about neuroplasticity. And I'm gonna go work out my brain.
Yeah, work those muscles out.